اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم. وبعد, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Very honored and pleased to have Sheikh Sulaiman Fan as well with us. Really, I shouldn't talk too much when we have senior scholars like Sheikh Sulaiman around. But inshallah, I'll say a few things with my psychiatry knowledge, inshallah. But refer to him for the Islamic knowledge, inshallah. Today, I want to talk a bit about the schizophrenia and psychosis. And hopefully Sheikh Sulaiman will talk a bit more about depression and anxiety and that other side of things. I mean, they're the main areas of mental health that we have, we have the depression and anxiety, and then we have things like schizophrenia and other sort of psychotic mental illnesses. So, inshallah, I mean, the thing to say at the outset is I may be asking more questions than answering questions, first of all. And that's the nature of the subject. So it's going to be partly just about raising some questions and ideas and things to think about. The Quran told us about the ruh. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. ويسألونك عن الروح. They ask you about the ruh or the spirit. And when we're talking about psychological and mental illness, we're talking about aspects of the psyche and the soul. As previous speakers have mentioned, the spiritual aspect cannot be divorced from the mental aspect. And in fact, mental probably means spiritual, according to our understanding from before anyway. So the Quran has given us a basic thing, about the ruh, the spirit. They ask you about the spirit. قُلْ الروح مِنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّي وَمَا أُوتِيتُ مِنَ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. Imam al-Ghazali mentions this in his introduction to his psychology, in the Ihya, that about the spirit, tell them the spirit is from the affair of my Lord. It's from the affair of my Lord, and you have only been given very little knowledge about it. So that's it. The Quran has delimited it straight away. There's no way we can ever get a lot of knowledge about the ruh. It's just not possible because the Quranic ayah has already told you will only have very little knowledge about this subject. So that's why I sort of caveat my whole thing is when we're talking about some of these issues about influences of Jinn upon a human being and things like that, a lot of them are then coming into the realm of the ruh, the spirit, and ultimately we as human beings we will only have a little knowledge. The Quran has already said that to us. So that's hopefully sort of the introductory thing. What can we say about Islamic understanding of Jinn spirits? Now, obviously, I'm sure you know, in the sort of Western scientific worldview, there's no place for metaphysical things. So there's no place for soul, and there's no place for Jinn. There's no place for angels and things like that. But for us as Muslims, obviously, that's not even a question. So there is a radical difference here between the Western psychology, you could call it, and Islamic, let's say, psychology. The only thing I would say is that when I say there's no space for soul or spirit, however, in the West, they use different terms. Like they'll use mind, psyche, ego, all of these terms. Actually, mind and psyche are, if you look at it, identical with what we call soul or spirit. As Imam al-Ghazali defined the essence of the human being, of the ruh, of the qalb, the spirit is idrakul ilm wal irada, the ability to perceive knowledge and the ability to act or make decisions, free will. So in Western psychology, that's referred to as mind or psyche. So in fact, they do have the soul, but it comes under a different term. I guess the difference is that they don't believe in an eternal soul. So when the body dies, the mind or the psyche will die with the body. But we obviously don't believe that. So in contrast to the Western tradition, the Quran begins by saying that the Quran is a guidance for those who believe in the unseen. So there's an immediate difference, a basic difference in worldview that we cannot reconcile this. There's no way to reconcile this. If you believe in the unseen, and if you don't believe in the unseen, you don't believe in akhirah, you don't believe in jinn, so there's no way There's no way you can come around this. We just have to accept there's a difference in our basic worldview. And that will impact on many, many different areas. So these are the sort of topics that come up amongst Muslims. When we talk about things like schizophrenia, psychosis, I suppose those are the sort of classical things that would be referred to as majnoon or madness in sort of traditional societies. This is where Muslims start thinking a lot about, oh, the person's got jinn inside them, or they're jinn possessed, or they've got black magic and things like that. So we'll just talk a little bit about each of these, inshallah. Now, I've done these slides at a time when I was just discovering how to do lots of PowerPoint animations. So it's a bit over animated for the situation, so please forgive me. I don't know what was happening to me, but I started doing all this, like, flashing out images. This is an ayah of Quran. I can't unfortunately read it, but anyway, it refers to the jinn. Yeah? So the jinn, they heard the Quran and they said, this is a marvelous Quran, and so on. And the one before that was the hadith of the Prophet, which is well known, that the al-aynu haq, the evil eye is true. And the evil eye is referred to in the Quran as well, but in a slightly oblique way in Surah Yusuf, where Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam, he does certain things, like he tells his sons, don't go into the city altogether in one big group, go different gates. And the reason that in the commentary they say is because he didn't want them to get evil eye when they see a big family, 12 sons and all this big family, so he wanted to not them get evil eye. But it's interesting, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says this fulfilled something inside Yaqub, but everything is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And ultimately, all of these come back to the same principle. We do believe in them, they do exist, but all of them are ultimately under the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just like some of us could get cancer, we could get heart disease, we could get diabetes, we could get evil eye. And it's just one of those things that is out there. And a black magic, the Quran refers to black magic as well. I tried different animations on this one, I think, just to keep it interesting. But the devils disbelieved, teaching mankind. This is the sort of famous ayah about black magic in the Quran. وَمَا كَفَرَ سُلَيْمَانُ وَلَكِنْ كَفَرَ الشَّيَاطِينُ يُعَلِّمُونَ النَّاسَ السِّحْرَ. They were teaching mankind the sihr, which we call black magic. There's only one, and it's just magic, but it's something which is not permitted. But once again, the Quran there, when it tells us about black magic, that this is a fact, These two angels were teaching this magic to people, but they were forbidden from studying it, though. It was forbidden for people to study it. And the Quran says, يُفَرِّقُونَ بِهِ بَيْنَ الْمَرْءِ وَزَوْجِهِ. Using this magic, they can separate between husband and wife. And so this exists because the fact is in the Quran. وَمَا هُمْ بِضَارِينَ بِهِ مِنْ أَحَدٍ إِلَّا بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. Straight away Allah says, however, they cannot harm anyone with this black magic except with Allah's permission. So as I said, everything always comes back to the same, yes, these things are out there. Like many other tribulations that can come up in our lives. But we shouldn't be fearful of them. If we trust in Allah, we believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just like a true believer shouldn't fear getting heart disease or getting a stroke or getting beaten up or getting attacked by villains outside. I mean, these things can happen and they may happen. Allah may test us. May Allah make our test easy for us and not a fitna for us in our deen. But we are here ultimately to be tested in this world. So these are a part of living in the world. These things do exist. And then now going into jinn possession, I put a red circle here. And this is where I may say some stuff that not all ulama will agree with, and maybe Sheikh Sulaiman may not even agree, but you can always say his side. So, but I can only say my own observations and my own experience. So I don't find in the Quran any direct reference to jinn possession. That what we mean by jinn possession is that a jinn is able to possess a human being. and take over the consciousness of the human being fully. Now, obviously, we have waswasa. Jinns are able to influence the human being. And also within the hadith, I haven't really found a convincing direct reference to a complete sort of jinn possession phenomena. There are some hadith that some people allude to it, like the hadith about the woman who had the epileptic seizures. But I actually feel that hadith proves the opposite, that it's not jinn possession, because if it was jinn possession, why would the Prophet ﷺ say, he said to her, if you want, I'll make dua and Allah will cure you of your ailment, or if you want, you can bear with it patiently and you will get reward. And she said, I will bear with it patiently, but make dua that I don't expose my aura. She had epileptic fits. So some people are using that hadith to say, look, that's a clear jinn possession. But for me, it's the opposite, because if it was jinn possession, surely the Prophet ﷺ would have got rid of the evil jinn that's possessing her. For me, that shows that it's a medical problem, a physical impairment, because he said you can have sabr, which we should have with physical illnesses, So if it was an evil spirit, I would have thought, Allah Alim, that's my own personal feeling and interpretation of that hadith. So that's the main hadith that people use for, as far as I know, to show that there is jinn possession.
Isn't there that ayah, shall I not inform you upon whom the devils descend?
Yeah.
They descend upon the sinful.
Yes.
I don't know, deal from.
Yet another word, shayateen, they descend, but does that mean possess? That's the thing,
Sorry, just another question on that ayah. Is shayateen and jinn the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, jinn are the shayateen are the bad jinn,
Okay.
but you can also get believing jinn.
Okay.
They're not called shayateen.
Okay.
So shayateen are only the bad jinn. The good jinn are called jinn, believers, the believers. So then we have, I'm going to skip this slide, it's not that relevant to us. Actually, it probably is. So when we talk about jinn possession, obviously many of our ulama have believed in jinn possession, and they do ruqya and things like that to get rid of the jinn and I have personally accompanied many very righteous, not many, but a few very righteous scholars who do ruqya, and I've observed that whole thing, about the person being possessed and the ruqya being done and all of that things. So it's, I'm not denying it. That's one thing I want to make clear as well. I'm not saying that there's never any case of jinn possession, and there's never. I mean, the ruqya is really interesting, because there's not much research being done in this. You see, to compare. Say someone has got, let's say, schizophrenia or some sort of mental illness. If they come to a psychiatrist, they're given certain medications. If they go to a faith healer, let's call them faith healers, Imam, they do ruqya. But there's actually no studies to compare what's the outcomes, So the debate is very polarized, Some people say, no, that's all nonsense. Other people say, that's all nonsense. But really, the honest truth is that we don't know. Because ultimately, for these type of severe mental illness, what you really want to look at is what happens 5-10 years down the line with that person. Often people can resolve symptoms temporarily, and a couple of months, few years later, they get worse again. So you want to follow them up for 5, 10, 15 years, and you want to see, has that person actually done better with the psychiatric pills? Because the pills are not going to cure that person either. It's just you're going to just suppress the symptoms, and you're trying to give them a better quality of life. Or has he done better with the Raqi, going to see a Raqi every week, every month, and getting ruqya done? And how do you compare it? Is you're going to compare, let's say, symptoms, and you're going to compare quality of life. They're the two main things. So, and those studies haven't been done. It's very, very, very. I mean, I did a degree in medical anthropology, which, alhamdulillah, I think it was a blessing from Allah, because it opened a whole new side to medical fields that I didn't even know was there, and most doctors don't know about. That there's a whole field of medical anthropology. Because those people, the medical anthropologists, they study a lot of these phenomena from a different angle. And some of the few studies that have been done for example, someone who's got schizophrenia, but they haven't been through the medical psychiatric system. They've just been dealt with in, say, a village with faith healers and things. Some of the very, very few studies, I mean, there was only one that I was talking about, suggested that the outcomes may actually be better for the person who's just been managed within the sort of extended village community with like faith healing and things like that. The outcomes in 5-10 years may be even better. So yeah, I mean, we just need to be careful before we jump to conclusions about either thing. What I wanted to say here quickly was about jinn possession. The best book I found in English is a book called Majnoon, Madness in Medieval Islam, by a professor from Oxford called Dolls. And it's a really quite a 2-volume thick work. It's a very amazing study. He's one of those proper old classical Oxford dons who really, they really get into their subject. And mashallah, he's looked at the Muslim Arabic works of Muslim physicians of early Islam, later Islam, and he's written a very 2-volume work all about how mental illness was dealt with by Muslims from the earliest times to later times as well. And the book's quite difficult to get hold of. I had to go to the British Library because it's not available anywhere, and I photocopied it, so I've got a photocopy at home. But it's a really, really good work. And one of the people I was mentioning earlier is really amazing how he describes about the Muslim hospitals throughout the Muslim world. For over 1,000 years ago, there were hospitals were totally free of charge. Every major Muslim city had a hospital, and it was free of charge, completely free of charge. Forget about the NHS and all this stuff. Now it's all partly privatized. Yeah, if you want to get good healthcare, you have to pay now. In the Muslim world, they were always free, and they were always funded by wealthy individuals like khalifas or princes or just other wealthy traders who would give the waqf and awqaf, and they would. So there was an income stream funding that hospital that will never run out, because once you set up an endowment, a waqf, it remains until Yawm al-Qiyamah, according to the fiqh. Sheikh Sulaiman will tell you. So it was an amazing thing. But in those hospitals, they had special wards for mental health patients. And in those and the type of treatments they were doing was amazing as well. They very much recognized some of the things that people have started doing now, like music therapy, aromatherapy. They recognize that the environment is very important for people suffering. They need a nice, calming, soothing environment, things like that. And they had psychological therapy, of course. But what I noticed from reading that book that came across to me was, I said about how I didn't find jinn possession in the early seerah, and if you look, for example, around the Khulafa Rashidun, I haven't really found any instances, of that. But very soon after that, you do find a lot of references to jinn possession. So within the Salaf period, like stories about Sheikh Ahmad ibn Hanbal dispossessing jinn and things like that. But because the Muslims, they had obviously during the time of Sayyidina Umar, very rapidly they had already taken over a large part of the Roman and the whole of the Persian Empire. And so they had come across a lot of practices, especially amongst Christian communities. And amongst Christian communities, jinn or devil possession was very common. Demonic possession was very common. It's mentioned in the Bible, Jesus casting out the demons and things like that. So it was a very, very much a Christian phenomenon, demon possession, and then you cast out the demons with the holy water and all that. So I personally, and once again, this may be very controversial, but I suspect that this is how it came into the early Muslim, the Muslims, the early Muslim, very early. We're talking about the Salaf. I think it came from the Christian teachings. So this is the reference of the book I was talking about, The Madman in Medieval Islamic Society, Michael Knowles. That was in the Psychiatrist, one of our British journals. They had a whole feature on possession a couple of years back. It's very little talked about in the psychiatric world, in mental health. It is recognized. It's called possession disorder, so it's not schizophrenia. actual jinn possession or that phenomenon is called possession disorder, and it's a very, very, very fringe. Like I've never seen a hard case of it in my whole time in Western psychiatry. But that's what we would actually call jinn possession. It's considered to be a dissociative disorder, which we can probably. I don't know. I think I'm gonna have time to come back to that. Jinn in the Quran we already mentioned. What does the Quran tell us about jinn? That they can see you, but you can't see them. Obviously, we know that, yeah. Obviously, Surah An-Nas. You're familiar with Surah An-Nas. Min sharri al-waswasil khannas. Whispers. He whispers in your heart and goes. So he has access straight to the psyche. Both good and bad jinn are mentioned in the Quran itself. So let's just talk a little bit about psychosis and schizophrenia, which was the second part of my presentation. Having said all that, the other thing I just wanted to quickly say before I forget, very interesting thing. We said demonic possession very common amongst Christians. So if you were in Europe 300 years ago, you would have seen a lot of cases of demon possession, right? Because it was a very Christian society at that time. Then modernity came about, right? Now no one believes in demons amongst these people. Now you don't see it anymore. You don't see demon possession here amongst British white people. I'm a psychiatrist. I haven't seen one single case. Well, actually, that's a lie. I probably have seen a couple. I've seen a couple of people think they're possessed by the demons, but
they think that they are.
they are, yeah,
Oh, right.
yeah, of course, yeah. So it's interesting, that when they no longer believe in it, it doesn't happen. You see what I'm saying? A similar thing you've seen in America. It's more common because they're still more Christian. So there's a lot more demon possession going on there. And they also have this thing called multiple personality disorder. I don't know if people have heard of that. Sophie, I know you know about it. I discuss it with my daughter all the time. Multiple personality disorder. It's not schizophrenia. People get confused. People think schizophrenia is multiple. It's a totally different thing. So multiple personality disorder is literally when people have multiple personalities and they can switch from one personality to the next. What's that film though?
Jekyll and Hyde.
Split. Yeah, split.
Also Jekyll and Hyde characters as well.
Yeah, it's similar to Jekyll and Hyde, but not exactly. To be honest, Jekyll and Hyde is probably manic depression. Jekyll and Hyde is different. That's quite a common thing we see. It's called mania, when the person gets manic and they just lose control. That's different. Multiple personality, you have completely different personalities. I'm Sheikh Ridhwan. Next minute, I'm Uncle Qadri, and I'm talking like a different person. I've got a whole different history. I've got different memories. I've got different personalities. And then suddenly I switch back, yeah? And sometimes some of these people have like 20 plus personalities. Most commonly it's 4 or 5. And it's quite common in America because the therapists over there, they believe in it. The therapists. They're really into Freudian therapy and things like that. In Britain, Freudian stuff is really dying out, but British psychiatrists are not really interested anymore. There's a few niches where you can find these Freudian psychotherapists. But in America, there's still a lot of, in America, it's a different culture. Like you were saying, about people here don't want to access therapy and psychiatrists. In America, it's the opposite. If you're wealthy, you have to have a shrink. And it's considered you should have someone that it's like the opposite, So these shrinks and these therapists are like saying to people, are you sure you haven't got another? I say, is there a voice inside you? Is it saying something? What's it saying? Oh yeah, I think it is saying something. Has it got a name? Are you sure? So then they've got this other personality. So it's just funny because we don't have any. I've never seen one single case of multiple personality disorder in this country, and I've not heard of it from my fellow colleague psychiatrists either. Because psychiatrists in this country don't believe in it. People but in America you've got loads of cases.
So it's not in the DSM?
I don't think it is. I think it comes under dissociative disorder, and then it might be like a fringe under dissociative disorder. That's a good point. We should double check. It is a dissociative disorder, but I've never seen it. So it's just food for thought. That's what I'm saying. I'm not giving any. I'm not saying, I'm just giving food for thought for people. So what is schizophrenia in that case? Schizophrenia is not multiple personality disorder. The other film, there was, I can't remember, but in Hollywood you come up with this and then people think this is schizophrenia, but it's a Hollywood imagination, this multiple personality thing. It doesn't, schizophrenia is something completely different. What is schizophrenia? Schizophrenia is a form of psychosis. So psychosis and schizophrenia are very closely linked. Schizophrenia is one cause or form of psychotic illness, we could put it that way. And what is psychosis? Once again, the lay people have got a very different meaning of psychotic or psychosis. They think it just means, like you were saying, the Mr. Hyde and all that, just someone going crazy. But in medical terms, it's very, very specific. For medical purposes, psychosis is literally is a loss of contact with reality, and there's three main symptoms that you get, which we're going to talk about in the next slide. But before we talk about so you lose touch with reality. So this is like the sort of classic madman that you see in the streets, just talking gibberish and looking very disheveled and shouting and talking things that don't make sense, right? That's that's basically schizophrenia. But it can be different other causes for it as well. That's the important thing here. It can be caused by brain injury. If certain parts of your brain are damaged by either a brain tumor or a brain injury of some other sort, you can get psychotic as well. It can also be caused by dementia. When people get more advanced dementia, some of you may have seen your elderly relatives. When they get more advanced dementia, they start losing contact with reality and start believing weird things. And so that's another common cause. And drug-induced is a very common cause, especially amongst our youth, sadly, today. A lot of my patients are, sadly, Muslim. They tend to be more amongst the Somali community that come into hospital. It's very, very, a lot of Somali patients I have that have this drug-induced psychosis, sadly. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. What particular types of drugs do you find that lead to these kind of symptoms?
It's mainly cannabis. It's mainly strong cannabis, skunk, especially skunk. They smoke skunk. Yeah.
Because there's always that conversation about how weed is natural and it doesn't do anything and it's good.
Heroin's natural. It's not opium. All drugs are natural. So it's not. That's not.
No, I don't agree with it either.
Yeah.
But, this is those that want to sort of counter argue. This is
yeah, of course. Yeah, no, it's valid. I mean, not valid, but you've got a good point. No, sadly, I mean, smoking weed, especially if you smoke stronger stuff, skunk, but even normal stuff, if you start smoking it regularly and start getting heavy use, the more and more chance you will have a psychotic breakdown. You will become paranoid, first of all, and then it can lead to a full-on psychotic breakdown as well. It doesn't happen to everyone. Of course, there are people who smoke it and they don't get that as well, and they just get.
Everybody reacts to it.
Yeah, but a certain percentage of people will, and I think with the stronger stuff, it's even more dangerous. The skunk. But yeah, sadly, it's amongst our youth, unfortunately, quite common now. And the sad thing is, then, if it carries on, then you can't recover as well. Mm-hmm. If it happens the first time, you stop smoking, you probably will recover. But if you do it again and again, eventually you'll come to a point where you won't recover. Even when you stop the drugs, you will just remain.
And
then it'll become schizophrenia.
Alcohol
you can get as well with chronic alcohol. Yeah, you can get voices and things like that coming about. It can happen with most drugs, to be honest. Yeah. So these are the three main symptoms that you get with the psychosis. So delusions, hallucinations, and disordered thoughts. Anyone want to hazard a guess? What's a delusion?
Everyone's trying to kill me.
Yeah. Could be that's like a paranoid delusion. So basically, delusion is defined. It's actually very hard to define, but for simplistic terms, it's something, a firmly held belief that is not true. In other words, we believe weird and wonderful things. The reason why it's so hard to define is sometimes it's really difficult to know what could be true or not. Like, let's say, for example, one common delusion you see is the man becomes convinced that his wife is having an affair. Right? Delusion of jealousy. But you can't be sure sometimes as well. So it can still be, she actually could be having an affair, but it could still be a delusion. That's the weird thing about it. But it's normally easier when they start saying things like aliens are watching me and MI5 are following me around everywhere, which is another common presentation.
And when I was doing my training, I did my psychiatry training in East London, and we had lots of Bosnian refugees, and who were actually being persecuted from their country and had come to this country. And it was really difficult to see whether they're being followed or listened to or not for intelligence, because you think it's a delusion in MI5, but sometimes they were. But they were a very unique example of a group of people who had suffered really badly in their country and were still being followed here. So
It's like if Faisal,
it's not,
it's like if Faisal said to me, MI5 are watching him. That could be true because, being an Islamic, doing this one.
You've gone through
Because we had a point where, I've been interviewed by anti-terrorist squad people. I wasn't paranoid. And I was telling my wife, I'm sure they're watching us wherever, probably listening to us when we're in Syria. But I wasn't paranoid. I don't think I was paranoid.
Exactly.
Maybe I was. I don't know.
What did your wife think?
She thought I was mad. And then you get the hallucinations, which are like self-explanatory. They're mainly voices, normally auditory hallucinations. And this is why people often think, oh, it's Jinn, it must be Jinn. But I think in these cases it's not Jinn. I can explain why as well. But possession disorder, that's more likely to be the Jinn thing. When if there is a Jinn thing. This is just a breakdown of the human brain. It's just misinterpreting. It's thinking the own thoughts are actually voices coming from outside. And thirdly, you get that's the person talking gibberish. They're just talking, but it's not making sense. That can also happen. You can have one of these. You don't have to have all three. You can have 1, 2, or 3 of these symptoms in psychosis. Sometimes people have one, and then it can be quite difficult as well.
So how long do these episodes? Is it like is this X amount of time that it's supposed to experience this for any one of those symptoms? Can it be like a one-off? Does that mean you still experience schizophrenia, or?
It can vary widely. If it's just a one-off and then it resolves completely, then it wouldn't be schizophrenia.
Okay.
If it carries on for over a few weeks and you're not doing drugs or other things that could be causing it, then it becomes schizophrenia. There's like a definition, 4 weeks or something, but sometimes people can have these symptoms for just a day, and it could be for anything. It could be extreme stress, it could be certain medication, you could even be anesthetic or anything, and then bereavement's a good one. So that could be just that's within normality, really. If you had a very brief.
Dr. Ridhwan, I'm just conscious of time.
I think I'm just about to finish actually.
Okay.
That's delusions, that's hallucinations, that's muddled thoughts. This is an example of someone writing who's got these muddled thoughts. Nothing like your writing, Uncle Cardi, I'm sure. In fact, it was a letter that Uncle Cardi wrote. So that was the last slide, actually. These were the points of reflection, because I think I've already mentioned some of them. So I've mentioned that one. How demon possession used to be common in England. These were just the thoughts that I'm going through myself. I'm in actually a learning position myself here. I think that's quite important. Similarities between Ruqya and hypnosis, which a lot of people haven't probably thought about, because I've seen the Raqis do their job, and I've seen hypnotists as well. Hypnosis does exist; it does work. The person has to be suggestible, and has to put themselves in a certain frame of mind that they're not resisting the hypnosis. And when you see the Raqi, it's very similar, because the Raqi will start saying, "Look, just focus on what I'm reciting," and also you put the person into a passive state when you're doing the Ruqya. So, and then I've seen the Raqi saying, then start speaking to the Jinn. You're in there. What's your name and stuff. So I think there's a whole a research which I don't know if anyone's done or even thought about this connection between Ruqya and hypnosis.
How would you do double-blind studies?
I was thinking, there was with hypnosis, they're now doing brain scans. Because the thing is, the technology has got so advanced, and this is literally in the last 5-10 years. You've got functional MRIs and things like that, where you can literally see how the brain is reacting to different things. with the imaging. So they've done things with hypnosis. I'll give you an example. They've done like a person who, you get a person and you tell them to put their hands, and you lift up their hand, yeah, and you see what's happening in the brain. And then you get a hypnotized person, and you say, and the hypnotist says to the person, raise your hand. So he raises it himself, but he's hypnotized. But the brain scan image is exactly the same as the one who had it physically lifted for him. In other words, and then you compare that to the one who does it voluntarily. So you say to the person, raise your hand, like me, I'll raise my hand, you see my image. The person who's hypnotized, their brain scan image is exactly the same as the one that did it without any conscious effort.
But passively. Yeah.
In other words, he was unconscious to what he was doing. So this is where, if we could get some Raqis to get a brain scanner and do the Ruqya, we can. There's a potential there for research to be done, but no one's going to fund it.
Yeah.
Nothing like that.
There has been like a couple of times you said where during like a Ruqya, you realised that it had to be a Jinn because of some reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, like what's
Well, it was. I've talked to my daughter before, but basically, some Ruqya I've seen has made me think. Because I was sort of looking at it from a sort of objective, like scientific thing, and there were instances where I thought this must be a Jinn. There must. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I think Jinn is very complex. How Jinn can affect human beings and how they interact. So especially if someone is sort of putting themselves in a passive state and accepting the Jinn to come in. So that, for example, I've seen the Raqi like reciting Quran, and whenever there's certain words that trigger the Jinn to like shake, and the person that's he doesn't know Arabic, but he's reacting to those words that are in Arabic, those specific words, things like that make you think, there's definitely something.
So you mentioned Jinn possession, but what about other forms of sihr? Because Jinn possession is actually when the Jinns physically take possession of the person, but there's other forms of sihr that can affect a person in different ways as well. And naturally, if they're going through these kind of symptoms, they won't understand what they're going through. When you go to a Raqi, it's so unregulated, you don't know who to believe and who not to. But you get told so many different things, and then how that ties back to.
Yeah, very good question. I think I'll talk about the second part first, about the lot of different Raqis. The other thing too was really interesting in my anthropology degree is that spirit possession occurs across the world in every different culture. It's not something to do with Muslims or Christians or and it's everywhere. Chinese, Indians, islands in the Pacific. Every culture seems to have this phenomenon of spirit possession. Good spirits, evil spirits, whatever it is. They normally have these people like holy men, shamans, that tend to have these spirits communicating and getting possessed by these spirits and things like that. So it's a global phenomenon. It's a global phenomenon. And then, so the Raqis, this is a very well-established tradition as well, from teacher to student. But who should you go to? Who do you trust? That can often be obviously difficult. I'll tell you a funny story related to that. There was one guy came to me. I'll keep it anonymous, obviously. I'm sure he's not watching or anything today. And he basically, said, I got this Jinn possession and everything. And when I get possessed by the Jinn, he was a long beard, practicing brother and everything. When I get possessed by the Jinn, it's really bad. I start swearing against the Quran and saying all these really bad things about Allah and stuff like that. And I said, oh, that's really bad. And then he started saying, oh, I don't know, I commit all these sins, really major sins, things like that. And I was like, subhanAllah. And then his mother, I spoke to his mother afterwards, she said, yeah, he does, yeah, it happens, he gets this, she said, I got a bit suspicious one day because I was driving in the car. He was driving, I think, or whatever. And then he said to his mom, stop, the Jinn's coming, So they stopped the car, and then suddenly the Jinn came, and they started freaking out, swearing. But she said, but then his phone rang. And suddenly he went normal and just picked up the phone and started talking. And I found that very suspicious, you know. That how come? So, and then this brother was telling me how he's done very horrible sins. I don't know what I'm going to mention them. That, and he's got a big beard. I was thinking, why are you telling me? And he seemed very happy about it. He wasn't like remorseful. And he was like, yeah, I've done, I'll go and see these women and really bad stuff. And I was thinking, what are you doing, bro? You got a big beard all the while. And then, but the funny thing was, then a couple of weeks later, one of my wife's daughter got possessed by Jinns. I think she was about 12 or 13. And she was getting this Jinn possession phenomena going on. And she said, Alhamdulillah, thank God this Raqi came and he done Ruqya, and then she got better straight away. So I was saying, oh, brilliant, mashallah, who's the guy? Because I'm always looking out for the people want to. And it was the same guy who had come to see me. The same guy who had come to see me, suffering from Jinn possession. So yeah, it's all chaotic out there, but I'll be honest, there are some good people that you can go to. There are. And Alhamdulillah, I know a couple, and I know Sheikh Sulaiman will be talking soon. I don't know if you do that type of thing or not, but there are also recently I found a good. Someone's recommended a very good. There's one, I think he's in East London, who does Ruqya. They do take some fee for it, but it's a very, it's very sort of from a very traditional. So that can be very beneficial as well.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
So just in terms of practical advice, like again, when I did my training, I met a couple of young Muslim men who were diagnosed with schizophrenia, and that they were saying that it was the voices. And I think part of our training, we had to put headphones on and have voices at us constantly to feel what it's like to be schizophrenic. And sometimes, like I remember one young, he must have been about 20, 21, and he was just like, he just had a voice swearing at him constantly. And again, grew up Islamically, nice Islamic family, not surrounded by foul language. So he found it really, really offensive to hear that voice in his head. Not all the time, but when it did come, it came on very, very strong. And another man who, again, was very institutionalized, unfortunately. But so if you are suffering, or you know a relative that's suffering with symptoms like hearing lots of voices that are really affecting you, what would you advise they do? Do you go and seek medical attention? Do they go and seek spiritual attention? What would the advice be?
Yeah, I mean, the advice is one thing, but I mean, what most Muslims will do, they'll go to seek spiritual attention first.
Mm-hmm.
And then if that doesn't work, they'll come to a psychiatrist. I mean, that's just how our community works, which is fine. I think, for voices, personally, I don't think it is Jinn normally, most of the time. I'll tell you why, because I've seen lots of cases where the voices say a lot of good things.
Mhm.
They're not always negative. And some people find the voices very comforting as well. And I just sometimes think, why would a Jinn be wasting his time just saying all these good things to this person? Like, they're literally advising them, yeah, you should do this, brother, it's good to do this and good to do that. It's more like an internal voice, but they're hearing it externally. And now, with the most recent sort of brain imaging studies, we are finding now the sort of pathways that can be affected that in the brain that differentiate between the inner voice and the outer voice. So there's some dysfunction, I think, going on there. I think Jinn phenomena are slightly different, personally. So I think the majority of cases, once again, I'm not. I don't know everything, but I think the majority of cases where they're hearing clear hallucinatory voices, it's probably something dysfunction in the brain, So I'd probably say go to a medical.
Yes.
The problem is a lot of this is that, it's anecdotal because it's a hearsay and it's a story from a story. It's often, like you say, because it's culturally, globally, tribal sometimes, etc., etc. So, but there are, and then we've had this instance where that person will say things that they couldn't have known. And language is one. So language services all sorts of things. Where that person is talking about something that they have no knowledge of. Right? They might be speaking in a different language. They might be bringing news that they don't have any knowledge about, and things like that, which shows that there's got to be something.
Have you seen that yourself?
No, this is the problem.
Okay, that's what I was going to say.
That's the problem.
So we've seen cases of people actually hearing things or actually having thoughts that come into their mind. So it's not I don't think it's as anecdotal as
No, what I mean,
No,
what I'm
but-
saying is, have you
yeah.
ever seen a case
I-
where they've
I have
given
seen
you
this.
knowledge that they
Yeah.
couldn't have?
I have seen this when someone's emotionally unstable, when someone's at the edge, that
Oh.
they are able to do things and say things that are, let's just say, that wouldn't represent that person in their usual state.
Mhm.
But they may be able to thought read, they may be able to be very perceptive, they may be able to, and so on,
Mhm.
which isn't actually them in their normal
It's not their
state.
usual demeanour.
So is that Jinn or is that kind of disorder?
Is that a question or comment?
I don't know.
It's
It's
a comment.
a question. It's a question.
Okay. No, I think that there is types of heightened perception that can occur, especially when people go a little bit manic, a little bit hypomanic. That definitely is a phenomena. But what I don't think they can mind read other people's minds or anything. But it's more like a heightened perception, like picking up minute cues and things like that.
So a couple of people sent in some questions to just
I don't know.
because they
Is that
couldn't
alright to
access
read
the
them out?
YouTube chat.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, fine. Yeah, sure.
Okay. So the first one is, how can you tell whether someone is suffering from a Jinn, black magic, or Nazr? Like, how can you distinguish between the three?
Jinn, black magic, or Nazr, how
Yeah.
can you distinguish between the three? I think Sheikh Sulaiman might say more later, but from my with Jinn and black magic, they're quite related according to the sort of the texts that are out there, in the sense that black magic is thought to happen through Jinn. So if black magic is done on someone, it's done through a Jinn. The Jinn actually comes and does whatever they're doing. Yeah, I to be honest, I don't think I'm an expert or anything in that, but that's my understanding. And Ain, the Nazr is something different. Nazr or Ain is something a bit different. The instances we have is more like you can get physically ill sometimes, or I don't know what you think, Sheikh Sulaiman, but there was a story of one Sahabi. He got Ain and he collapsed. One of my one sheikh, a very famous sheikh in Syria, Sham, he was disabled in a wheelchair, and he always said I had Ain on me. That's how I lost one. I mean, from a very, you probably think he's had a stroke, but what he said it happened in a dance. He remembers it exactly when it happened. He said it was one of my female students. She looked at me. I think he saw some sort of flash coming from her eye or something. And he said he completely just, he collapsed, and then he just couldn't walk after that day. So, yeah.
But could you not say that, obviously, with the medical perspective and the Western approach, you're looking at the manifestations of whatever that is. So it could manifest as a stroke, but could the underlying spiritual cause be a spiritual cause like Ain or black magic? Where's the spiritual overlap? Because you're saying, obviously, just to clarify that Jinn possession, it can happen, but obviously it's hugely over, perhaps exaggerated or over diagnosed or something.
I'm not even saying it can happen. I'm saying I'm not ruling out the possibility.
Right, okay.
Okay.
So where's the, if everyone's presenting medically, where's the overlap? Is there an overlap with the underlying spiritual cause, or is it all very separate?
No, I think it's all very related, and I mean, in medieval times, a lot of illnesses were put down to black magic and Jinn. I'm talking about even in Christian.
Yeah, with
tradition.
and then they perform exorcism.
So everything, they used to think, for example, there's a little demon. If someone had problem with their urination, let's say, they would think there's a little devil next to the bladder. There's pictures of it in the books of that time, And if someone had breathing problems, there's a little demon inside their lungs and he's causing that problem. And they used to try to do things. So it's all related. I mean, all I can say is al-ainu haq. I mean, it is true. So whether that happens, as you say, it could happen, but then it's like there's a medical manifestation, like a stroke.
Because it's Qadr Allah at the end of the day, and surely there must
Yeah, of
be the
course.
metaphysical aspect to our physical illnesses. Like if it's been written that we're supposed to get this physical illness, it has come from a spiritual place. Perhaps I think it's tricky to say. There was just
We just have a couple of questions and then we'll. Yeah.
Yeah. Someone online said, how do you explain when an individual is possessed and speaks foreign languages unknown to them?
That's a really good question. I don't know if everyone heard that. How can you explain when someone is possessed and speaks foreign languages unknown to them? If you can show me that, I will 100% believe in jinn possession. But please show me before you say. And have you seen? I'll tell you why. Because the amount of stuff you hear and you can't Once this Raqi that I was following around, all the people around him were very excited. They were saying, yeah, there was. The person who had the jinn, they were speaking Arabic, and that person who was possessed, he can't speak a word of Arabic. So they were telling me, he was speaking Arabic, it was amazing, you should see it. I was saying, subhanAllah, I've got to see this, this will be 100% solid proof for me that jinn possession can take place. So I went the next day, same guy was possessed, the Raqi was doing the Ruqya. So the Raqi was speaking to him in Arabic, and the jinn was But the jinn was replying, just nodding his head and shaking his head. He wasn't actually speaking Arabic, if you know what I mean. But, so they were saying, oh, he understands Arabic. That's why he's, answering with yes or no. I think that's a bit different to saying that he's actually speaking Arabic, you know what I mean? So I think I would just be really wary. I mean, if this thing does happen, why haven't we seen a YouTube video on it? Because everyone's got smartphones. People are just recording anything they see nowadays, right? So if this phenomenon is happening, why is no one recording on their smartphone? And so, I know there are other jinn stuff out there on something, by the way, but yeah.
so send it in if you do have a video. And
Yes, please. Yeah.
Didn't Sheikh Hassan Ali have videos on YouTube?
Who's that?
I'll send you.
I don't know him.
Just a couple more brief points and then we'll wrap up. We'll have a shift on mine. Yes.
So yeah, carry on.
Good. So someone asked, how does the evil eye work in Islam? Is power given to the shaitan to cause things to occur? It's sort of how it works.
Yeah, I honestly don't know. As far as I know, it's just I mean, traditionally they felt there are some people are more susceptible to give evil eye than others. They do tend to be women. No discrimination or anything like that. But certain women, especially, are thought to be more prone to give evil eye, if you know what I mean. So it's just part of their nature. I don't know if it's something to do with hasad. A lot of people think it's to do with hasad. I'm not sure. Maybe it is or not. I don't know. But one of my colleagues, Sheikh Mahdi, who studied in Mauritania, he told me an interesting thing. In the Maliki fiqh, they actually have in the chapter of jihad, they have a thing that some of these women, you should take them with the army when you go for jihad, because they can give aim to the opposite army. I'm not joking, it's in the fiqh.
There's a thing about people giving aim not in a necessarily bad or
That's
intentionally
true,
bad way.
To help you out. But they say
No, that's a very good point. It's not necessarily given in an evil way, That's why you should always say mashallah.
You project your
That's why people keep saying.
That's why you have to say mashallah to prevent it, because you could potentially give it to your own family member. If you look at your daughter or son and you think mashallah, I mean, you don't say mashallah, but you're thinking they're very beautiful or successful or something like that, you could give them ain. So yeah, it's a very good point. It doesn't have to be like a bad thing.
Yeah.
So you must say mashallah or mashallah la quwwata illa billah anytime you see something good.
I just want to raise something. So it was online, so I don't know the people personally myself, but when the Taliban took over Afghanistan, a lot of these practitioners of black magic, they were posting online and expressing how strong the defense mechanism of these Taliban. Obviously, these people are Muslims. They're saying we're trying to do black magic on these Taliban, we just can't do it. And they said the jinns have told us, we've got knowledge. They read this ailments, and those ailments were the three, the Surah Fatiha and the three goals. So obviously, I'm not sure how authentic that is, but this is genuinely what black magic practitioners are saying against the Taliban, who have got this strong force field around them. They can't practice black magic on them. So, just a point I wanted to.
Interesting, very interesting.
It's
You've
interesting.
got to tell me what sort of YouTube channels you have access to. I didn't realize there was like black magic practitioners out there, but I'm sure
The
there must
highlight,
be.
I guess, is to read the protection law, then take the necessary means,
Exactly.
and then you can't complain about an issue when you're not taking the necessary measures to.
But we've got to be careful that propaganda by the Taliban themselves could be putting these black magic practitioners saying you can't be touched. You know,
Unless they were there before the Taliban came, the same people was
Yeah.
there before.
if they came out just as the Taliban, they're going to be
Yeah.
taken
Think
as
about
well.
it.
If you take it as a positive,
Yes, yeah.
then it's they're
Yeah,
directing to the Quran and holy. They are very practicing.
And don't say Taliban too often because
Yeah.
MI5 really will be after us.
That's maybe a delusion.
Last question.
Yeah,
We'll wrap up.
so someone said, how can we give ourselves Nazr? How does it work? Who made the bad thing happen? Allah.
Yeah, I mean, similarly, like we said, I mean, the Nazr or the Ain, it may not be intentional and it may not be in a bad way, it can happen. So that's why I just say, MashaAllah. I mean, a lot of Muslims have that written, MashaAllah, on their houses and stuff. I mean, that's not going to protect you, but hopefully it'll remind you to say, MashaAllah. So just always just